7 ships, 7 voyages with no return. No distress calls, no goodbyes. Only a lonely wheel spinning in silence. And one question drifting across the waves. Where did they go, and what might have gone with them? From a sulphur carrier that vanished without a trace, to a ghost yacht with dinner set, but no one to eat it, we're peeling back the fog on 7 of the most bone-chilling disappearances in modern maritime history. Some theories sound reasonable, some made scientists consider early retirement, and the rest, only the ocean knows. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single case. And drop a comment, which one do you think is real and which is just the sea playing tricks on us? In 1906, a ship vanished into thick fog off the coast of Vancouver Island. Its name was SS Valencia, and what happened next became one of the most chilling mysteries in American maritime history. People believe the story ended when the waves took the hull and 71 lives with it. But for years afterward, ghostly shapes kept appearing, drifting right where the ship had gone down. No radar, no signals, no explanation. If a ship has truly sunk, why do people still see it return? And if it's not an illusion, then where did Valencia actually go? The SS Valencia wasn't a ship that turned heads. It wasn't flashy, wasn't lined with brass, and certainly wasn't built for elites sipping wine on the upper deck. It was a working vessel, steam-powered, iron-ribbed, and known more for its deep, echoing horn than for any elegance. Cutting through the fog of the Pacific Northwest. Launched in 1882, Valencia served for decades along the coastal routes from San Francisco to Alaska, through storms, reefs, and treacherous waters. It earned trust not for how it looked, but for its stubborn ability to survive. But on the night of January 20, 1906, Valencia departed San Francisco on what should have been a routine voyage to Seattle, carrying 108 souls passengers, crew, and staff. No one aboard knew that night. The ship wasn't simply heading into the sea, but into a memory no one would ever escape. The ocean was dark. Fog dropped like a curtain over a stage, and the heavy steamship pushed forward into the unknown, unaware that this was the place that would swallow it whole and never give it back the same way. Valencia drifted through the night, its deck lights reduced to flickering specks, swallowed by thick fog like dampened cotton hanging in the air. Every wave that struck the hull sent a jolt through the vessel, as if it were being dragged, piece by piece, toward something unseen. Around midnight, on January 21st, a sound tore through the darkness, the ship's hull smashing into a reef. Metal scraped against rock with a scream like something being split in two. Valencia had strayed off course and was now stranded in one of the most dangerous stretches of the North Pacific. Water flooded the lower compartments, fast as if the sea had been waiting for this moment all along. Within seconds, the ship listed, and panic erupted like wildfire on dry wood. Screams rang out. Metal doors slammed. Footsteps pounded the narrow corridors in desperate rhythm. Lifeboats were dropped in a frenzy, but the wind was too wild, the waves too vicious. Some boats hit the water and capsized within seconds. People leapt overboard, unsure whether they were choosing life or death, only knowing that staying put meant waiting for the inevitable. On deck, amid the shrieking voices and relentless waves, Valencia became a stage of chaos. No more leading roles. No more passengers, only raw, primitive fear surfacing from every soul on board. And with the night still clinging tight, no one knew would they live to see the dawn. As the first light of dawn pierce through the thick fog, the scene emerged like the remnants of an unfinished nightmare. Valencia was no longer a ship. It was a shattered wooden skeleton, wedged against the reef as if the sea had kept it as a burnt offering, a grim monument. On the remaining fragments of the deck, a few survivors still clung to the rigging like numb shadows, suspended in midair, frozen, motionless. Wind howled through the torn cables, making a faint, ghostly whine like a ship moaning through its own death. There were no more screams, no more cries for help, only hollow eyes, staring into each oncoming wave not to escape, but as if bracing for the inevitable. From the cliffs on shore, witnesses could do nothing. Rough seas, hidden reefs, and distance made every rescue attempt impossible. They could only watch a ship break apart, and with it, the people on board. A few lifeboats that had drifted away in the night were found days later, their passengers barely alive. Some were rescued, but spoke little, their eyes always staring far away, as if still seeing what they'd left behind. The rest were never recovered. No one knows how many slipped away into the sea. Unnamed, undocumented. Valencia did not just dissolve in seawater. It lodged itself into the memory of the living, like a wound that refused to close, and perhaps into the memory of the ocean itself, a memory the sea has yet to let go of. The disaster ended in 1906. But Valencia, though shattered, refused to stay buried beneath the sea. Years later, fishermen and sailors passing through the waters near the wreck site began telling stories, ones that never made it into any official report. On nights when the fog grew thick and heavy as poured concrete, a ship's silhouette was seen, drifting silently, no sound. No lights, no crew. Witnesses swore that its shape, the sharp bow, the high wooden deck, the sails sagging like mourning shrouds, looked exactly like the Valencia. When they tried to signal it with lights or draw closer, the ship would fade, dissolving into the mist as if it had never been there at all. In 1933, a lifeboat was pulled from stormy waters off Berkeley Sound. Painted on its wooden side, still visible, was the number of the Valencia. The paint was faded, but the wood was intact, not rotted, not splintered even after 27 years adrift. It shouldn't have survived, not in that condition, not for that long. The rumors turned darker. A body washed ashore, still wearing a life vest labeled Valencia, hair long gone, skin and fabric melded together in decay. Some believe the ocean never truly returns what it takes. It only sends back pieces, as reminders. No one could ever prove those stories were real, but no one dared to fully deny them either. Because in those waters, sometimes you see something in the mist and you're not quite sure whether it saw you too. Unlike other ghost ships born from hazy tales or unverified rumors, Valencia was real. It existed. It sank. It took lives. And it was documented in official reports, survivor testimonies, navigational charts, and detailed investigations. But from that truth, a legend began to take root. Not the kind with wailing spirits in the dark, but a ship that simply refused to stay sunk. People didn't have to imagine it. They just went out to sea, saw it, and came back with eyes that no longer looked the same. Its name gradually became tied to something that sounds like a novel, but isn't: the graveyard of the Pacific, a stretch of ocean from Oregon to Alaska, where hundreds of vessels have vanished without explanation. Valencia was just one of them, but it was the only ship that came back, again and again. And perhaps that's the most frightening part. Because when the sea takes a ship, we can mourn it, but when it keeps returning silently, unmanned, unrotted, only its shape and memory intact, we start to wonder, are all sunken things truly in the past? Or is Valencia an exception, a fragment of history still drifting through the present, waiting to be seen and never forgotten? Today, the SS Valencia no longer appears on any map, nor in any shipping registry, but its name and its shadow still drifts quietly over the waters where it once ran aground. After the 1906 disaster, new lighthouses were built, shipping routes were adjusted, and warning systems installed. Everything improved, except for one thing: the fear. That fear still lingers among sailors who pass through the waters off Vancouver Island, especially on long, fog-laden nights when modern instruments fall silent, and you start seeing things in the mist that shouldn't be there. Some fishermen swear they've seen a faint yellow light drifting along the horizon, an old-fashioned glow, steady and sourceless. Unregistered by any radar, it floats silently, then fades into the fog, leaving behind the chilling sense that someone or something is still watching over those waters. Could it be that Valencia never truly sank? Or has the ocean merely kept it hidden, buried in memory, veiled in mist until the day it sends it back? Crewless, voiceless, nothing left but a silhouette and a cold wind. And if you ever see it, an old ship shape gliding silently through the haze, pray it's just your imagination. Because if Valencia is still out there, then maybe her passengers never really left. Amid countless disappearances at sea, there is one story that continues to baffle to this day. A large ship left stranded on a sandbar, not damaged. No distress call. No one on deck. Everything still in place. Except the crew. Where did they go? Did they leave in silence? Or were they taken by something no one dares to name? No bodies. No explanation. Only theories overlapping like waves. And the deeper we dig into the past, the less certain we become of what truly happened. So then, what really happened to the Carol A. Deering? The Carol A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner built in 1919 in Maine. It wasn't luxurious, and it didn't run on steam, but it was built to last, to endure rough seas and haul heavy cargo like coal up and down the Atlantic coast. Measuring over 250 feet in length, it was one of the last great commercial sailing ships before the world fully turned to engines. In August 1920, the Deering was assigned a routine voyage to transport a load of coal from Virginia to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The journey began without issue until Captain William Merritt suddenly fell ill and had to disembark in Delaware. His replacement was Captain W.B. Wormel, a seasoned mariner with years of international sailing under his belt. The ship sailed on, but from that moment, something shifted in the air on deck. No one could have known that this single change in personnel would become the first turn in what would soon spiral into one of the most mysterious disappearances in American maritime history. After delivering its cargo in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the Carol A. Deering turned back toward the United States. Its deck was empty of coal, but heavy with something else: silence, unease, and the unmistakable sense that something was no longer quite right. On the return trip, the ship stopped in Bridgetown, Barbados, to refuel and restock supplies. There, a small but unusual incident was reported. Captain Wormel was overheard complaining openly about the new first mate, describing him as rude and untrustworthy. At the time, no one thought much of it. But in hindsight, It would become one of the last concrete clues anyone would ever have. On January 28, 1921, a lighthouse keeper at Cape Lookout, North Carolina, spotted the Carol A. Deering passing by, but something was off. Instead of the captain, a man who did not look like an officer signaled for help using hand flags, not by radio, not by flare, but through a strange, distant silence. Stranger still, the crew stood scattered across the deck, and none of them looked familiar. 2 days later, on the morning of January 31st, the Carol A. Deering was found run aground on the treacherous sands of Diamond Shoals, a stretch of ocean known for swallowing ships whole. There was no radio contact, no crew, and perhaps most baffling of all, no sign that anyone had ever tried to leave in a hurry, as if someone had quietly guided the ship to its final resting place, and then vanished from the world without making a sound. When the Coast Guard approached the Carol A. Deering on the morning of January 31st, 1921, they had no idea they were about to step into one of the strangest scenes in American maritime history. The ship lay aground on the sands of Diamond Shoals like a giant white skeleton, resting in the restless sea. But what raised the hairs on their necks wasn't the waves. It was the unnatural stillness that clung to the vessel. No lookout, no signals, not a single movement. As the boarding party stepped onto the deck, they noticed something immediately. Everything was too orderly. The stove still radiated faint heat. Bread sat unfinished in the oven. Meals had been prepared but left untouched. A teacup lay face down on the floor, as if a meal had been interrupted abruptly, urgently, or by something far worse. The captain's quarters were empty. The ship's log and all navigation tools had vanished. Lifeboats were missing, but with no signs of being hastily launched. No snapped ropes, no drag marks, not even a scrap of canvas. Even stranger, all personal belongings remained exactly where they should be. Shoes, clothing, papers. It was as if the crew had calmly stepped off the ship and then vanished into thin air. Those first aboard shared the same eerie impression. There were no signs of panic, only the heavy sense of being left behind, as if something had quietly drained the life from the ship in a single breath. No screams, no struggle, just an echoing silence that clung like fog. From that moment on, the Carol A. Deering was no longer just a coal schooner. It had become a ghost ship. When a massive sailing ship runs aground with no crew, no lifeboats, bread still rising in the oven, and the ship's log vanished like a magician's trick, the whole country starts playing detective. A classic maritime mystery. But the reactions? Full Reddit conspiracy energy. Some believe the crew staged a mutiny, tossing the captain overboard and seizing control. Sounds dramatic until you ask who hijacks a ship and then just leaves it beached. What kind of mutiny forgets to actually sail away? The pirate theory gets tossed around too. Tempting until you realize nothing was taken. Cash untouched. Food still on board. Wallets unopened. Maybe these were minimalist pirates who boarded, judged the ship's interior design, and ghosted because it wasn't aesthetic enough. The caught in a storm theory made the rounds, but that day, the sea was so calm even the fish looked bored. 15 seasoned sailors vanishing without panic or trace. It's giving elite-level hide-and-seek energy, and for those who believe everything is the government's fault, good news. Some say the Deering saw something it shouldn't have. A Prohibition-era smuggling deal. Maybe, and someone hit the crew format button to wipe it clean. When every human theory fails, there's always the sky. UFOs, Maybe aliens just wanted a bite of that American sourdough. The Carol A. Deering didn't disappear. It's just waiting for someone smart enough to decode the ocean's status update. Cape Hatteras, the place where the Carol A. Deering ran aground, doesn't sit squarely inside the Bermuda Triangle, but it's close to the edge. Very close. Close enough for whispers to start swirling, and as if someone had deliberately stirred more fog into the mystery. Another detail emerged just days earlier. The SS Hewitt had also vanished. Same time frame, same waters, and like the Deering, no debris, no distress call, not even a whisper. 2 ships, 2 vanishing acts, 1 silent sea. The press went wild. Some newspapers dubbed it the invisible trap. The mystics and true believers, they were all in, convinced the Bermuda Triangle had reached out a ghostly hand beyond its usual borders. Coastal townsfolk started leaving their lanterns on at night, not to light the way, but to see what might be creeping past their backyards. If social media had existed back then, Ghost Ship USA would have been trending in every state, and the newspaper printers probably laughing all the way to the bank, selling record numbers of copies thanks to crewless ships that somehow still knew how to steal the spotlight like pre-internet influencers. As for the Deering, once just another working schooner, it suddenly found itself the main character in a tale so strange. Even the ocean breeze seemed to hold its breath to hear what happened next. The Carol A. Deering didn't stay stranded on the sand forever. After weeks of being battered by wind and waves, the hull eventually broke apart and began to sink into the sea. What remained its masts, rudder, and deck was salvaged. Some turned into firewood, others displayed in small coastal museums. But the ship's true soul, the mystery that has kept people up at night for over a century, still lies somewhere beneath the cold, restless waters of Diamond Shoals. No bodies were ever found. No one wrote home. Not a single goodbye. 15 men vanished as if they had never existed. And for more than 100 years, no one, not a single soul, has been able to explain why. Not because it's the most dramatic disappearance, but because it was so clean. It defies logic. No wreckage, no screaming, no blood, not even a scribbled note. As if someone had quietly wiped away every trace, rearranged things just so, and then gently nudged the ship ashore, like a strange offering to humankind. To this day, the questions remain unanswered. Every theory feels like a half-fit key, and if the ocean truly has a memory, perhaps it's still keeping that secret to itself. A secret only it understands. Or maybe, one day, the sea will send up another ship, and we'll be forced to start guessing all over again. If you board a ship carrying something more explosive than a group chat at midnight, then it vanishes without a goodbye, without a signal, without even a decent scrap left behind. What do you call that? An accident? A mystery? Or a walking mistake that learned how to float? In February 1963, SS Marine Sulphur Queen departed port with 39 crew members and over 15,000 tons of molten sulfur on board. 3 days later, it disappeared off the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. No distress call, no witnesses, and, of course, no explanation. All that remained was a faint oil slick, a few drifting life jackets, and a question the ocean has refused to answer for over 60 years. Originally, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen was a World War II oil tanker, a classic retired veteran that no one bothered. But then one day, someone had the brilliant idea, hey, what if we turned it into a mobile pressure cooker? And so it was converted to carry molten sulfur a substance that must be kept boiling at around 275 degrees, stored in giant tanks welded straight into the ship's gut. On paper, sure, that sounded doable in theory, but in practice, it was like driving a Fabergé egg made of explosives. And like every poorly thought-out career change, the ship didn't take it well. Leaks appeared. Rust spread. It was even described in reports as not seaworthy. But for reasons only invoices and shipping deadlines truly understand, the ship still quietly pulled away from port like an employee handing in their resignation via sudden combustion, according to multiple reports. Before leaving port, the SS Marine's Sulphur Queen was already showing clear signs of existential fatigue, a weakened hull, rust spreading from deck to keel, and sections described as unlikely to hold up if the ocean decided to slap it a little too hard. One former crew member didn't mince words. She shouldn't be sailing. One small mistake, and she'll blow. A comforting send-off. Really? Yet, on February 2nd, 1963, the ship still departed from Beaumont, Texas, carrying 15,000 tons of molten sulfur and 39 men who, let's be honest, were probably betting more on their next paycheck than on gut instinct. The destination was Norfolk, Virginia, a route slicing straight through the Florida Straits right along the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. A sea zone known for having a very selective palate. It only swallows things that are large, complex, and inconvenient to explain. At the time, no one thought much of it. But looking back, the journey feels less like a routine delivery and more like hiking across an active volcano just because Google Maps labeled it shortest route. A decision the ocean was more than happy to capitalize on. On February 4th, 1963, the final radio signal from the SS Marine Sulphur Queen was recorded approximately 150 miles off the coast of Florida. After that, everything went silent. No emergency call, no distress signal, no final words sent back to shore. Search and rescue teams were deployed, but it was like hunting for a needle in the bottom of the sea. They found a few life jackets drifting, an empty lifeboat, and a faint oil slick on the water's surface. But all of it felt more like ellipses than a full sentence. There was no evidence of an explosion, no sign of extreme weather, and no plausible explanation for a disappearance so quiet it bordered on surgical. A ship over 500 feet long, carrying 39 souls, had seemingly evaporated from reality overnight. If the ocean truly had a history erase mode, then the Marine Sulphur Queen may have been its perfect test case. And from that moment on, an invisible crack began to settle in the minds of those left behind. What could make a ship vanish without even saying goodbye? A ship loaded with molten sulfur, rusting at the seams, its structure practically sighing with every bolt, and then it suddenly disappears in a stretch of ocean infamous for cleaning up messes so well, it's like they never existed. You don't need to be a mystery novelist to feel something's off. And when reality offers too few facts, imagination starts doing overtime. Some believe the ship exploded. With temperatures that high and aging pipes, all it might have taken was a single spark to turn the vessel into a mid-ocean firework display, the kind no one saw, no one filmed, and no one was left to clean up. Others point to a structural failure, a ship that split in two and sank so fast, no one even reached the distress button. Given that experts had already flagged the ship's frame as on life support, it doesn't sound far-fetched. Just unfortunate that the deep sea doesn't hand out receipts. And of course, no Bermuda Triangle mystery is complete without a touch of the paranormal. Some claim the ship may have teleported or been swallowed by a magnetic vortex science hasn't yet had the budget to explore. Sounds wild. Maybe, but when 15,000 tons of sulfur vanish without leaving behind even a bolt, wild starts sounding a lot more reasonable. Then there's the quietest theory that the company knew full well how dangerous the ship was, but sent it anyway because a contract is a contract. And when everything blew up, both literally and figuratively, what followed was a single, cold statement. We deeply regret the loss. But perhaps the strangest thing of all, no matter which theory you choose, the ending stays the same, a silent void in the ocean, where logic lies buried beneath 275 degrees of boiling sulfur. As news of the disappearance spread, the families of the 39 missing crew members did what anyone would. In a tragedy with no closure, they demanded answers. Dozens of letters were sent, calls for independent investigations made, requests poured in for a statement from the company, but it all felt like knocking on the door of a house, long abandoned, only to hear a hollow echo. We don't know what happened either. While families sifted through their last bits of hope, troubling details began to surface. That the ship had been flagged as unsafe, that its heat retention systems were unreliable, that several crew members had refused to return after previous voyages because it shook like it was about to fall apart. All those red flags neatly wrapped in blind faith and a shipping deadline. And when the official investigation was finally released, the conclusion was the stuff of legend. Cause of disappearance could not be determined, as if the ship had wandered off on purpose, wiped its own trail, and vanished for deeply personal reasons. You could call it a technical failure, or a moral one, but perhaps the most chilling truth is this: even when 39 lives vanish at sea, no one is truly forced to give a straight answer. And in moments like that, faith in the truth feels a lot like one of those drifting life vests, light as air, and not saving anyone. All that remained of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen were a few drifting objects and an official report with more blank space than actual answers. Theories, there were plenty, but the deeper one digs, the more something feels off. If it was an explosion, why did no one hear it? If the ship broke apart and sank, why were no major fragments found? And if it was just a tragic accident, why was there never a single distress call? This story isn't just about a ship that vanished. It's about a void no one seems eager to fill. An uncomfortable silence hanging between maritime safety and corporate accountability. And sometimes, what's lost isn't just lives, but the belief that someone out there truly knows or even wants to know what happened. The Marine Sulphur Queen may have dissolved into the ocean, but the question it left behind still floats at the surface, bobbing like a wave waiting for someone brave enough to dive after it. Or at the very least, someone willing to look directly at the place where truth might have chosen not to rise. A half-finished meal, a still warm cup of coffee, the GPS quietly tracking, the engine humming along. All that was missing were the three humans. Sounds like the start of a dark comedy or a prank that went way too far. Wrong. This was Kaz II, a 32-foot catamaran that turned into an open-concept ghost ship off the coast of Australia in April 2007. No storms, no mayday, no bodies. Everything was normal to the point of being unsettling. The meal untouched, the fishing line still cast. And if there's anything scarier than the ocean at night, it's a fully functioning boat with no crew and three men who vanished as if they'd just stepped out to take a phone call. Three middle-aged men: Derek, Peter, and James set out on a catamaran trip for a bit of light relaxation. Not professional sailors, but no amateurs either. They had GPS, life jackets, satellite radio, backup food supplies, and even a laptop probably to check tuna prices or live stream the perfect clouds to their golf buddies. They departed from Airlie Beach, Queensland, heading toward the calm waters near the Great Barrier Reef. The plan was simple fish, drink beer, swap ridiculous stories, then come home and brag to their wives like men who had survived the wild. But just 3 days later, Kaz II was found adrift, aimless, the engine still running, the flag fluttering in the breeze. Everything was perfectly in place except for the 3 men. No blood, no goodbye notes, no mayday calls. A trip that began like a sunny picnic ended like a social experiment authored by the universe. When the Australian Maritime Patrol approached Kaz II, they assumed it was just another case of lost boat, sleeping crew like they'd seen before. But the moment they stepped on board, every instinct flipped into full weight. What mode? First, the dining table neatly set, untouched, as if the men had just stood up to grab the pepper shaker and then vanished off the face of the earth. The coffee was still warm, the laptop screen still glowing, the fishing line still drifting lazily behind the boat. Clothes were folded neatly in the cabin, like their mums had just stopped by to tidy up. The engine hummed along, GPS coordinates kept updating. No blood, no signs of struggle, no mayday call despite the radio sitting right there on the table. The boat was eerily perfect, and the absence of life made it feel more alive than it should have. A gentle sea breeze moved through the half-finished scene, as if trying to erase the final sentences no one got to say. The silence wasn't weekend peaceful. It was the kind that makes you pause and check whether you're in the opening scene of a horror film. The most popular theory, and one that sounds fairly reasonable at first, is this one man fell overboard. Maybe he slipped. Maybe a gust of wind caught him off guard. Or maybe he was trying to untangle a fishing line from his shorts. The second man saw it happen and jumped in after him like a scene from a low-budget action movie. The third man stayed on board, panicked, tried to throw a lifeline or steer the boat closer, and then he, too, slipped. End of story. Logical, sure, but the more you think about it, the more it feels off. If one person remained on board, why didn't he shut off the engine? Why didn't he grab the radio, sitting just a few feet away, and call for help? Why didn't he toss out a life ring, a chair, a frying pan, literally anything to mark the spot? There was no reaction, no message, not even a scribbled note that said, "BRB, saving mate." And then comes the biggest question of all. All 3 men fell into the water, and not one of them resurfaced. No shouting, no one swimming back. The deeper you dig into the facts, the more unsettling it gets. Because if this was an accident, it was possibly the quietest accident in maritime history. And if it wasn't an accident, then maybe the only thing truly innocent on that boat was the boat itself. If you're going to mysteriously disappear, at least pick a setting with thunderstorms, crashing waves, and a creepy soundtrack. But no, the 3 men aboard Kaz II vanished on a day so sunny it could have been a travel brochure. Clear skies, calm seas, no storms, no alerts. There wasn't even enough wind to build suspense. Kaz II didn't stray far either. It drifted just off the coast, right near the Great Barrier Reef, a busy area, packed with boats, tourists, and possibly more GoPros than sharks. The kind of place where ordering a pizza is probably easier than calling the Coast Guard. And yet, these three men still disappeared without a single goodbye. In what's considered one of the safest patches of ocean in Australia, no one saw anything. No one heard anything. No cameras, no life jackets floating. It was as if the universe collectively decided to unfollow them and left the boat to drift alone as a gentle reminder, hey, the ocean doesn't need a reason. A vanishing act under perfect weather, it's like someone played life on easy mode and still lost. After months of investigation, analyzing data, inspecting the boat, interviewing family, reviewing weather patterns, and maybe even consulting a psychic or two, Australian authorities reached their conclusion: no signs of foul play. Possibly an accident. That's right, possibly. A perfectly vague answer that closes the file without anyone needing to explain a thing. No one was charged. No one blamed. No creamy. No capsizing. No giant squid. Just three men who went out to sea and somehow slipped through the cracks of history. Their families grieving, but left in limbo, were never offered a satisfying answer. With no crime, no clues, and nothing solid to anchor the story to, the only thing that remained was a giant, echoing silence. They left port chasing sun, waves, and maybe a few fish, and they became the most well-known legend ever told through silence. A disappearance so tidy, so minimalist, it made people wonder if randomness itself had developed a taste for aesthetic. Kaz II didn't sink. It didn't burn. It didn't make a single sound to mark the moment something went horribly wrong. It just drifted quietly, fully stocked with food, functioning equipment, and a strange emptiness where three men were supposed to be. No blood, no clues, no drama, and it's that unnerving cleanliness that makes the story more chilling than any horror movie with a soundtrack. Of all the strange things the ocean holds, the scariest isn't the sharks, or the storms, or the mysterious lights in the night. It's a boat with no explanation, an absence no one can touch. Not every ghost comes with rattling chains. Some ghost ships don't look haunted at all. They're just perfectly empty, and it's that emptiness with no trace, no voice, no conclusion that makes the story of Kaz II one of the most disturbingly pristine mysteries the ocean has ever kept. Because sometimes the truth doesn't sink, it just quietly leaves, along with the only people who ever knew it. Usually, the scariest part of a disappearance is the silence. No message, no trace, no closure. But with SSL Faro, what haunts us most is the clarity. Because this massive cargo ship didn't vanish into some mythical fog, nor did it sink unnoticed in the dead of night. It went down in the age of satellites, GPS, LiDAR, and black boxes. And that very black box recovered from 4,500 meters beneath the sea, recorded every final second, the machines shutting down, the water crashing in, the voices of people trying to stay calm in the last moments of their lives. No one survived. And yet, somehow, we can still hear them clearly, truthfully, heartbreakingly enough to make one wonder, if the ocean had a memory, would this be the sound it chose to keep forever? The ship named Pride, SSL Faro, was no stranger to the American maritime world. Launched in 1975, the nearly 800-foot cargo ship had completed hundreds of voyages, braving harsh weather and transporting thousands of tons of goods across the Atlantic and the Caribbean. It wasn't new, but it was a workhorse, well-maintained, upgraded, and operated by a seasoned, highly experienced crew. On September 29, 2015, El Faro departed from Jacksonville, Florida, carrying 33 souls and a full load of cargo bound for Puerto Rico. On deck, everything felt routine. The atmosphere was calm, the procedures familiar, just another voyage in a long line of many. No one had reason to worry. No one could have imagined that this would be a journey with no return, and the ship named the Lighthouse would become the last thing to emit light before everything vanished into darkness. When El Faro left port, Hurricane Joaquin was still just a tropical depression swirling far southeast of the Bahamas. The meteorological data at the time hadn't yet drawn a clear picture, and Captain Michael Davidson, a man of vast experience, believed he could outpace the storm using an old-school strategy sail ahead of it. He chose a direct, shorter route, one that skirted the northern edge of Joaquin, where forecasts predicted the weather hadn't yet turned. It was a decision that saved time and fuel, and in hundreds of previous voyages, it had worked. But this time, nature refused to stick to the old script. Joaquin intensified too quickly, and it didn't spiral away. It changed course. The storm suddenly veered right, transforming into a Category 4 monster with winds reaching 220 km/h, slamming itself directly across the path El Faro was racing down. In a vast ocean, the ship became a mere dot, speeding toward the eye of the storm, unaware that it had already crossed the invisible line between calculation and fate. From that moment on, every passing minute aboard wasn't routine. It was a slow-motion race against time that humanity was beginning to lose. At 5:43, on October 1st, 2015, El Faro sent out its final transmission. Then came silence. But what happened afterward, we know not because of luck, but because of a black box recovered from more than 4,500 meters beneath the sea, 2 years after the tragedy. For over 26 hours, the ship's voyage data recorder captured every sound. It wasn't just cold data, it was human voices. The officers reporting water flooding the cargo hold, the wind slamming the hull like whips, and Captain Michael Davidson's steady voice over the radio, choosing his words with quiet weight. "We're listing. I think I've done everything I can." The final moments weren't chaos. They weren't panic. They were a handful of people in the middle of a furious ocean, trying to stay calm, trying to save each other, trying to steer a ship that had lost propulsion, lost power, and was slowly tipping toward its fate. Some stories sink in silence, but not El Faro. El Faro spoke one last time, and that voice still echoes not just in the black box, but in the memory of anyone who's ever listened to the recording. Because this tragedy isn't something we imagine anymore. It's something we've heard. Every heartbeat, every pause, every final breath. When the final signal disappeared, October 1st, 2015, as Hurricane Joaquin tore mercilessly through the waters off the Bahamas. The Coast Guard waited for a transmission El Faro had promised to send. But then, nothing. No mayday call, no final coordinates, no sign the ship was even still there. The search operation launched the same day. Helicopters scoured hundreds of square nautical miles. Recon planes swept their radar through Category 4 winds. But the sea gave no answers. Only fragments appeared, a few shredded lifeboats, some drifting life vests. And then, eventually, an orange lid from the black box floated to the surface, like the ship's final message breaking through the silence. El Faro hadn't just gone missing. It had gone down, taking 33 souls with it, with no survivors. It took nearly 2 years for engineers to recover the full black box from the ocean floor, 5 meters deep, a place where light does not reach and memory seems to vanish. And yet, down there, El Faro remains like a quiet voice still waiting to be heard, in the deep where no one speaks. But everything is remembered. Some shipwrecks become legends because no one knows what truly happened. But with El Faro, what haunts us isn't the mystery, it's the undeniable truth. Every detail was clear. The captain received weather updates more than 6 hours out of date. The hurricane intensified faster than any model had predicted. The warning systems failed to alert in time. And by the time the crew realized they were off course, it was already too late to turn back. The investigation report pointed to a chain of errors: human, systemic, strategic, and reactive. But not one of the 33 people on board gave up. No one denied responsibility. They didn't scream. They didn't panic. They didn't abandon their posts. They stayed with the ship until the very end, like soldiers standing firm in a fortress crumbling beneath them. This wasn't the tragedy of a single misstep. It was the tragedy of trust in technology set against an ocean that remains untamed. And a reminder, no matter how modern we become, the sea still holds the final authority, and with just one misjudgment, even the most capable hands can be overwhelmed, not by incompetence, but by the belief that we'll always have time to correct course. SS El Faro now rests on the seafloor. There was no farewell ceremony, no flags at half-mast, no drums or mourning horns, only wind, waves, and darkness surrounding her. And yet, the ship did not sink in silence, because their final words still echo, like the last pages of a diary written in voices and courage. El Faro's black box is not just a technical device, it is the final witness to human dignity in the face of despair. Throughout the hours-long recording, there were no screams, no chaos, only sailors trying to repair, deciding calmly, keeping each other focused, and saying goodbye with honor. No one chose that ending, but they all chose how to face it like true seafarers. Today, El Faro is part of maritime training. Her name is cited in safety conferences. She is a painful but necessary lesson, and a name no one in the industry can forget. Because if the ocean truly had memory, surely it still holds El Faro as something sacred. Even the waves dare not wash away. Some shipwrecks happen out in the open ocean, where sharks rule, storms scream, and GPS quietly gives up. But Edmund Fitzgerald was different. It didn't sink in the sea. It sank in a freshwater lake in North America. Back in 1975, a time when people already had color TV, disco music, and yes, canned meat sandwiches. And yet, the largest ship on Lake Superior, along with all 29 crew members, vanished without leaving so much as a farewell note. No SOS, no signal, not even a polite help. Over the radio, just one strangely calm final message, and then silence. Nearly 50 years later, we still have no answer. Only a legend remains, written in steel. Waves, and a silence that echoes louder than sound. The beast of Lake Superior, massive and stylish, even in death. If cargo ships had LinkedIn profiles, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald would have been proudly marked as a top 1% influencer of the Great Lakes. At 222 meters long and nearly 14 tons in weight, this vessel was an absolute unit, lovingly nicknamed by the shipping world as the freshwater Titanic. The only difference, it didn't hit an iceberg, it simply vanished, without even a slow-motion farewell. Launched in 1958, the ship was named after the chairman of the insurance company who sponsored it, also known as Whoever Pays. Gets the naming rights. With thick steel plating, cavernous holds, and cutting-edge design for its time. The Fitzgerald didn't just carry iron ore, it sailed like it was writing industrial poetry. Smooth, precise, and completely unaware that one day it would become the backing track for a tragedy. Big, strong, beautiful, and then without warning, it disappeared like someone who deletes their entire social media account without posting a single breakup status. On November 10th, 1975, Lake Superior stirred. A typical winter storm, the kind of weather Great Lakes folks shrug off while brewing another cup of tea. No apocalyptic warnings, no CNN breaking news, just wind, waves, and what everyone assumed was a local-level nuisance. But if you were Edmund Fitzgerald, it wasn't so casual. The ship, now loaded with nearly 26 tons of iron ore, drifted across the lake like a very anxious kettlebell. Radar, flickering like cheap hotel Wi-Fi. Radio, in and out like a call from inside an elevator. Weather, waves taller than rooftops. Wind screaming like Earth hyperventilating, yet somehow still within operational tolerances. At least according to the manual, Edmund wasn't alone. It was following the Arthur M. Anderson, a reliable companionship. The two kept in touch until one odd moment, Anderson called again. No answer. No, we're tilting. No taking on water. Not even a vague something's up. Just silence. Like texting, hey, and getting left on read. Then quietly blocked. On the lake that night, the wind howled. The waves roared, but Edmund was simply gone. At 7:10 p.m., the Edmund Fitzgerald sent a short radio message to the Arthur M. Anderson, its companion ship, still crawling through the storm behind. We are holding our own. A reply that sounded very much like, we're fine. But don't ask follow-ups. No panic. No drama. Just exhaustion like a tired office worker on Friday at 5 p.m. And that was the last anyone ever heard from the Edmund Fitzgerald. No SOS, no alarm, no cries for help, no shouting, not even a confused uh-oh. The Anderson called back, and on the other end was nothing but silence. Not weak signal silence. There's no one left to pick up silence. What's eerie is that radar lost the Fitzgerald signal less than 10 minutes after that. We're fine message. Meaning either the ship sank faster than a blink, or something beyond the weather had a hand in it. But there was no explosion, no smoke, no sign of any accident. Just one cold, stubborn truth, like the still water, that night. From that moment on, the Edmund Fitzgerald simply ceased to exist. And if silence is golden, whoever wrote that had never heard the kind of haunting, hollow silence Lake Superior gave back that night. When search crews finally located the Edmund Fitzgerald, snapped clean in two at the bottom of Lake Superior like a giant Kit Kat bar left in the freezer too long, the questions flooded faster than the hull ever did. There was no social media back then. No Reddit threads, no YouTube conspiracy docs. But somehow, the 1975 equivalent appeared anyway: dockside bar philosophers, hairdressers with engineering opinions, and that one guy who knew someone in the Coast Guard. Some whispered about rogue waves towering freaks of nature over 35 feet high. Crashing onto the ship like the lake itself had personal beef with Edmund. Others murmured about metal fatigue, that maybe hauling 26 tons of iron ore through a winter storm was a bit too much, even for a beast made of steel. especially steel under freezing temperatures, punched repeatedly by waves. Honestly, even a transformer would have filed for early retirement. And then there were the quieter, colder suggestions: a radar failure, outdated manuals, a crew flying half-blind through the storm, hoping the lake would play nice. No single theory ever stuck, but all of them circled back to one brutal truth: the ship didn't stand a chance. And once again, humanity had done what it does best: underestimated nature, overestimated itself, and acted surprised when water proved it was still the boss. No black box, no final audio recordings, and definitely no CGI recreations of the sinking from 16 dramatic angles. Just a man with a guitar. Gordon Lightfoot, a Canadian singer-songwriter, wrote a ballad to bid farewell to the ship, as if he had been the last person to hear the waves swallow Edmund whole. The song has a title as long as a 9th grade literature essay, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It opens with a line that sounds like North American folklore: "The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down." And just like that, from a freshwater shipwreck, Edmund Fitzgerald was promoted to national legend. No zombies, no ghosts, no jump scares yet. The story still gives millions a chill every time they look out over Lake Superior. In fact, Edmund Fitzgerald became the most famous ghost ship no one ever saw actually being a ghost. And if you're wondering, wait, why hasn't Hollywood made a movie about this? Well, honestly, who needs a movie when you've got a song that makes the entire Great Lakes region go quiet every November? Maybe that song is the only voice the ocean, or rather, the freshwater lake, was willing to give us, and the rest still plays on like a wordless soundtrack, too deep for any sonar to reach. If you thought vanishing in the middle of the ocean was a 20th century thing, High-Aim 6 would like to recalibrate your GPS. In January 2003, a Taiwanese fishing vessel was found drifting calmly off the coast of Western Australia. The engine was still running, fuel tanks full, and freshly caught fish neatly packed in the freezer. Everything was accounted for except the crew. No blood, no distress signal, not even a missed call. It was as if everyone on board had been personally selected by Thanos for a snap. The problem? No one knows what happened. The bigger problem? No one can guarantee it won't happen again. And one question continues to drift with the waves. What if the ocean didn't swallow you, but just borrowed you for a while? When Australian Maritime patrols spotted a vessel drifting 80 nautical miles off the coast, they thought it'd be something mundane, maybe engine failure, or a few sailors too drunk to steer. But when they climbed aboard, they realized this was one of the eeriest scenes imaginable without a single drop of blood. High-Aim 6 was still running. The engine purred like spa music. The fuel tanks were fuller than a doomsday prepper's pantry. And below deck, fish packed neatly in the freezer, organized like a Japanese grocery store display. The kitchen was untouched. A drinking glass sat exactly where it had been set down. The only thing missing from the entire ship was the people. No signs of struggle. No distress call ever sent. Not even a footprint leading off the deck. It felt like a sci-fi movie where the crew gets mysteriously blinked out of existence while the ship just carries on with the mission. Or, if you prefer a more relatable image, it was like a grab car with the app still open, the engine humming, but the driver had evaporated into thin air. If you were expecting a handwritten log, an SOS scrawled in fish blood, or at the very least, a lonely flip-flop floating on deck, sorry. High-Aim 6 doesn't do cliches. All investigators found was a passport, a few articles of clothing, and a silence so thick It felt like you'd been dropped into the mute mode version of Among Us. The captain, a Taiwanese national, and his Indonesian crew vanished together without so much as a goodbye emoji. When investigators spoke to family members, they were gifted responses so vague they could double as fortune cookie messages. One said they went somewhere. Lovely. Thank you for pointing us into the void. Another suggested maybe they were lured off the ship. By who? With what? Complimentary steak dinners. A free cruise. Nobody knows. The only certainty is this: no one was forced. No signs of a struggle were found. And not a single crew member has ever resurfaced. It's the kind of disappearance where even panic didn't bother showing up. Modern society has a charming habit when we don't understand something. We get creative, and with High Aim 6, human imagination kicked into high gear on a level even Netflix hasn't dared to write. Some believe the crew staged a mutiny. No shouting, no bruises, not even a passive-aggressive post-it note. Just a quiet dinner, a few side glances, and then a graceful descent into the ocean like seagulls trained in ninja arts. Others suspect something more shadowy. Maybe the boat wasn't just hauling fish. Maybe it carried things that required low light and zero questions. If you're thinking smuggling, you're in the same thought bubble as half the planet. Unfortunately, not a shred of evidence was found. No contraband, no weapons, no mysterious crates. Just fish. So many fish that if any mafia was involved, it had to be the sushi syndicate. And if you're part of the sci-fi crowd, welcome aboard. Wormholes, a Southern Hemisphere Bermuda Triangle, or a frozen fish curse, all theories are on the table. Because honestly, nobody disappears this cleanly in the age of satellites without help from something off-script. 2003 wasn't the age of handwritten letters, smoke signals, or dolphins carrying mail. It was the era of GPS accurate to the meter, satellites watching every inch of the Earth, and AIS tracking systems monitoring ships 2 and 47. And yet, High Aim 6, a vessel the size of 3 apartments welded together, drifted across the ocean for weeks, ghosting along like it was on a quiet vacation, with no one noticing. No distress call, no alert, no digital breadcrumbs. It was as if modern civilization had lagged, and the ocean, not one to miss a chance, simply pressed Ctrl+Z on a few humans and left behind a ship as a passive-aggressive memo. Technology's great, but don't get cocky. What made it worse? Everything was working, every machine intact. If someone had picked up a phone on board, they could have ordered pizza or the Coast Guard, depending on their mood. So maybe the real question isn't, where did they go? Maybe it's, was the world too distracted to notice them vanish? Or did something make sure we wouldn't? High Aim 6 is a paradox that floats. It didn't sink. It didn't burn. It didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. It just remained, drifting quietly as if searching for answers the world had already forgotten to ask. No crew, no bodies, no obituaries, no tears, no funerals, and no one held accountable. It was a tragedy that no one dared confirm had actually happened. The families were only told they were no longer on the vessel, a phrase so vague you could use it to describe someone who left to buy bread and never came back for 20 years. And the ship, it was towed to port, stripped of all clues, and left to sit in silence like a loyal dog abandoned at the pier, still staring out at sea, waiting for a master who would never return. And that's how this disappearance ended. No blood, no explosion, no closure, just one giant ellipsis. drifting endlessly across the ocean and into the minds of anyone still trying to make sense of what really happened.